We do it every single Thursday here on this live show on the Hard Count on the On3 YouTube channel. Our final thoughts for this upcoming weekend. And we got some great games. Got a lot of great games. Got the SEC Championship. You got the Pac-12 Championship on Friday. I mean, the ACC Championship should have some entertainment value by nature of what that line looks like right now. I believe it was 2.5 last we checked. What are some of the final thoughts we have for this upcoming weekend? We'll talk about it in a second. First things first, though, make sure you're subscribed right here. We're going to be at Georgia, Alabama. We will have content for you from the field after the game, if they let us on the field. If not, we'll have content on the content in the stadium after the game. Myself, Andy Staples, both going to be there. Make sure you're subscribed. For all the behind-the-scenes content, for our thoughts in-game, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, at JD Piquel. We appreciate y'all so much for that. All right, so let's keep on rolling here. When it comes to the SEC title game, what are some of our thoughts there? For Georgia, I just want to make sure we say this. If Georgia wins the football game, and Carson Beck goes for 300 plus, 3 touchdowns, he deserves to be in New York City for the Heisman. Now, does he win it? Whole other conversation. But this is going to be the best defense and secondary that he's played against. And make no mistake about it, for Georgia to win this football game, they will have to throw the football. They will have to be two-dimensional. And so if he goes out there and delivers in the fashion that he's delivered to this point in the season, at that point, we got to put some real respect on Carson Beck's name. We've been talking great about him on this show for a minute now, but it feels like by nature of all the 5 stars he's surrounded by and the fact that he doesn't do it in the same kind of flashy way with, throwing back across his body and making, no-look passes like Patrick Mahomes, for some reason we kind of discredit Carson Beck. Dude just steps out there and is productive every single Saturday. So if they do it in the SEC title game against a defense in a secondary like Alabama, he deserves some real Heisman juice, and we are going to scream about it on this show. Again, should he win it? I think Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix probably lead that conversation, but I'll tell you what, Carson Beck will be in my top 3 if they end up doing what I think they're capable of doing in Atlanta. Now, on the other sideline, you got Alabama. And there's so much talk around Jalen Milroe, and deservedly so. I think he probably is the most impactful player in this entire game because of how much Alabama is going to lean on him to make some plays throughout this football game. But when it comes to the most important position, the most important position in this game outside of Jalen Milroe is that safety position for Alabama. You got Caleb Downs, Jalen Key, Malachi Moore, and a big reason for that, for Georgia to win this game, they're going to need to be multiple offensively, and them being multiple offensively starts with taking advantage of that safety group because they're going to do a lot of window dressing with jet sweeps across the formation. They're going to try and mess with the eyes of the second and third level of that defense, so staying disciplined is one part of it. 2, being able to fill in run support. Kirby Smart talks a lot about wanting to get to that second and third level of a defense for his running backs, being able to get downhill. That falls on the safeties. Being able to diagnose quickly, trigger quickly, tackle with effectiveness and with a fair amount of security and insurance, like that's going to be crucial for Alabama. Okay? Other part of that, being able to play well in pass coverage is enormous, but based on what Mike Bobo does, again, going back to the pre-snap movement and the shifts and the window dressing, they're going to do a lot schematically to try and throw Alabama off their game, like we saw Texas do in week 2. It's going to fall on these safeties to sort that out pre-snap, during the play. Like, it's going to fall a lot on these guys to be able to, I guess, diagnose that. It's probably the right word to use there. Now, lastly, we know this with Georgia. They're going to lean pretty heavily on their tight ends. Brock Bowers, Oscar Delp. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Lawson Lucky get some snaps here. The matchup there is the safeties. Like for Caleb Downs, I understand he's a true freshman All-American for us here at On3. I think he's going to be one of the best of all time in Tuscaloosa when it's all said and done. You need him to be able to play like a fourth-year senior, like he has all year. Fourth-year senior, fourth-year player, senior, whatever you want to say. Need him to be able to be dialed into the nth degree, as with Malachi Moore, as with Jalen Key. Like, that's what it's going to take, is those guys being on their P's and Q's, not being too overly impressed with the eye candy of Georgia, and being able to tackle well in the run game, cover well in the pass game, especially against those tight ends, because that's who they will be matched up with. Difficult task lining up against number 19, Brock Bowers, but if you want to win this football game, I think you have to be able to at least manage that matchup if you're Alabama. Now, for Oregon and their Pac-12 title game, it's going to be a movie in Las Vegas now. I said it's going to be a prize fight, just like we see a lot of the time when it comes to boxing and UFC in that city. This will be no different with Oregon and Washington. And I said this in an earlier segment during this live show. I want to make sure we say it again. Oregon controls their college football playoff destiny as a one-loss conference champ. They do. And Texas and Bama deserve a ton of credit for what they've done this year. I'm not saying either of those teams should be left out. I'm just saying you got to figure out which one of those teams you want to have in, because Oregon deserves to be in, no question. And the reason why I say that is the College Football Playoff Committee, every single Tuesday night, they play the theme music. It's really tense. We got Reese Davis reading through those teams. And every single Tuesday night, Oregon is the best one-loss team in the country. If you beat the number 3 team in the country and avenge your only loss of the season, I don't know how Oregon would be left out. No idea. It would not compute to me if Oregon, beating the number 3 team in the country, were to be left out. And this is not to throw shade at Texas, but I just want to talk about them because I think it's a good example. Texas plays a top 20 Oklahoma State team. Texas currently is still behind Oregon. Texas beating Oklahoma State, a lower ranked team than a Washington, would not somehow catapult Texas past Oregon. If the committee liked Texas more than Oregon right now, they would have already moved them past them because of that Alabama win. So the fact that we see Oregon ahead of Texas right now gives me a little bit of insurance that I know Oregon already is ahead of that team. But when it comes to Alabama, I understand if they beat Georgia, that whole conversation opens up. I'm just telling you, Oregon, you win, you're in, period, mic drop, the end, as we say on this show. So that's it for the Ducks when it comes to our final thoughts on their Pac-12 matchup. Now, Florida State, they're kind of the mystery team in this whole thing. By nature of it being a 2.5-point spread against Louisville, and Florida State's kind of been on the ropes a few times. They've had to get off of it a few times when it comes to finding ways to win in the fourth quarter and having a great effort in the second half. And overtime, when we saw them against Clemson, I think there's a little bit of a narrative out there with Tate Rodemaker that I don't know if it's incorrect necessarily, but I do think it's incomplete. Because we have a pretty small sample size, and a lot of people saw that first start against Florida and are just defining what Tate Rodemaker is. And I'm not here to tell you it's wrong. I'm just saying, do we really want to define one player by his first start on the road in the Swamp, rivalry setting, with a team that's fighting to make bowl eligibility in Florida? Like, I would be a little bit slow to define what Tate Rodemaker is going to be as a starting quarterback at Florida State. So my prediction is I think he's actually more dynamic down the field than people already believe he is. I think they're going to have to throw to beat Louisville, and I think they're going to want to throw to beat Louisville by nature of their best players being Keon Coleman, Jaheim Bell, Johnny Wilson, like getting into those freak shows on the outside and at the tight end position with Jaheim Bell. They're going to want to / have to do that, and I think Rodemaker delivers. And that's why I think they do win that game over Louisville. So that's why we're watching that, and I think that's the shot we want to call. A lot of jumping to conclusions based on one start. If we did that, Jalen Milroe wouldn't have been starting after the Texas game for the rest of time for Alabama. And we all saw how that played out against USF, and we saw what he did the rest of the season and why they're playing for the SEC title. So I'm not saying Tate Rodemaker's Jalen Milroe. I'm just saying I think we maybe let that bake a little bit longer before we pull it out of the oven and decide what our opinion is on Tate Rodemaker. Now, last one I want to get to here. You got Texas playing Oklahoma State. And there's a lot made about Oklahoma State and Ollie Gordon and them being able to run the football against Texas and that kind of being the key battle. And I'm just here to tell you what's been true about Texas the entirety of this season is what I believe will be true yet again on Saturday in Jerry World. Defending Texas is like playing that whack-a-mole game at the arcade, but the machine is malfunctioning. There is no possible way to be able to whack all the moles that Texas is playing with offensively. They have 3 individuals that have over 500 yards receiving on their roster. Jatavian Sanders, Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell. All 3 of those cats, you can't give double coverage to. Just purely by nature of the arithmetic of the defense, there's no way to give the adequate number of attention to all those individuals. And so what I'm saying is it might be a thing where you whack the first mole in the first quarter. Maybe they kind of minimize Texas for the first half. But at some point in time, when that machine malfunctions, there's going to be somebody open at some point in time. There is not enough defenders to account for all the options that Quinn Ewers is going to have. And I think Quinn Ewers is going to be able to rise to the occasion as he has multiple times now throughout this season, the Alabama game being the most notable. I think they'll win that game, and I think a big reason why will be the pace they set offensively with their passing game. So that's our shot we're calling there. Excited to watch that one. Hey, it's conference title weekend. It's going to be a great weekend. Going to be some hardware handed out. Going to make it tough on the committee, I would imagine. But at the end of the day, Yes, there's going to be a lot of teams that win their conference, but the real winners, isn't it us as the college football public? I like to think so. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.